Hello, friends. Welcome to the Dino Podcast. I'm your host, Dino Beslick, and I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, two-time Olympic gold medalist, Kristen Faulkner. In Paris 2024, Kristen shocked the cycling world. She won the women's road cycling gold, beating an absolutely stacked field of competition. She followed that up by leading Team USA to gold in the track cycling event, making her a two-time Olympic gold medalist. This is an incredible achievement for any athlete, least of all someone who's a relative newcomer to the sport. Just a few years ago, Kristen wasn't racing professionally, but she was crunching spreadsheets working in venture capital in New York City. So today we'll talk all about that incredible journey from office athlete to Olympic gold, and we'll have a lot of fun. So please welcome to the Dino Podcast, Kristen Faulkner. Kristen, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Dino. It's nice to be here, and I'm excited to share my story.
We're very excited to have you. It's a real honor for me and honor for the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Little Saints, the mushroom-powered cocktails and spirits that you drink instead of alcohol. Do you like to consume nice beverages in social settings, but you're tired of alcohol ruining your weekends? The hangovers, the next day regret? Try Little Saints mushroom-based cocktails instead. They're powered by functional mushrooms like reishi and lion's mane, long used in Eastern medicine for their properties of calming the nervous system. No, they're not psychedelics, and no, they won't get you high. The Little Saints cocktails do give a light, euphoric buzz, a certain take the edge off feel that I find very nice in social settings. Plus, they're alcohol-free, sugar-free, and they have only 5 calories per serving. So unlike alcohol cocktails, Little Saints not only taste good, but it's good for you and your body. Try your favorite cocktail flavor today, including Negroni, Spicy Marg, and Paloma. You can order all of these on littlesaints.com, and best of all, you can save 20% by using the discount code DINO20. That's littlesaints.com, discount code DINO20 to save 20%. I'm very excited to partner with Little Saints. I'm a big fan of the product personally, and there's some very good people behind the brand, so you should order some today. So, Kristen, you were probably my favorite story of the Paris Olympics, particularly because I can't think of another example of an office athlete, someone who worked an office job, who took the leap to become not just a professional athlete, but an Olympic gold medalist. Why don't we start the interview with your line of work after graduating from Harvard College in 2016? What did you get into after college?
Yeah, so I moved to New York City to work in a venture capital job. I was working for Bessemer Venture Partners as an analyst there, and so I'd been a rower in college, and when I moved to New York City, I really missed that. So I kind of attended an introductory women's clinic in Central Park in early 2017, and that's how I got into it. But I was working. Yeah, full-time job. When you're fresh out of college, you're working, 10 to 12 hours a day. They like to make you grind. And so my first 6 months, I wasn't doing that much sports, to be honest. And then after 6 months or so, I started to really miss it. And I'm from Alaska, and Manhattan was a bit of a concrete jungle for me. So I started spending my mornings in Central Park, going on runs, and I was looking for an outlet, and that's really how I got into it. But yeah, I was working in venture capital for my first 2 years out of college.
Incredible. And when you did get into it, what was the progression to ultimately realizing, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and ultimately realizing maybe I should pursue this more seriously?
It was definitely a progression. Like, it didn't happen overnight. I would say I went to this introductory women's clinic. I think it was March or May of 2017. It was in the spring sometime. And right away, I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my goodness, how have I not known about cycling my whole life? And so pretty instantly, I was excited about it. I started waking up every single day and going to bike ride in Central Park. And I've been used to exercising every day. So kind of getting up and doing my morning exercise, that wasn't foreign to me. But waking up really early was because in Central Park, I joined this local team and they had practice at 5 a.m. So I was waking up at 4:30 a.m. and then going to do laps of Central Park at 5 a.m. and then going to my job at 8. So I'd be gone from 5 to 7, come back, shower, get ready for work, have a smoothie breakfast on the go, and then start my work day. So I was usually pretty tired by 8 p.m. And I usually went home around 8 p.m. at night, and some of the analysts would stay until 9 or 10, and by that time I was so tired. But I would come to the office pretty early sometimes. And so that's what I did basically for the first year. Was I would wake up really early, and actually during the winter time it was too cold to ride outside. There was ice on the road, so I would ride my indoor trainer, and I would still do it in the morning before work. And I remember sometimes I would be reading my investment memos like on the bike trainer right before work, and like trying to catch up on everything I needed for the morning meeting. And I'd be multitasking, on my indoor bike trainer, feeling like I had to get in my workout and I had to get in the investment memos. And so I was definitely like multitasking a lot to try and make it work. But yeah, I mean, my experience in New York was very different from most 20 something year olds. To be honest, once I got into cycling, we had races at like 6 or 7 a.m. in Central Park on Saturdays. And so my Friday nights, I wasn't going out with, the 20 something year olds. I was going to bed at 9 p.m. and waking up at 5 or 6. And so I would say, my journey to becoming a cyclist, like there were a lot of sacrifices in it. And it wasn't like I just quit my job and then won the Olympics. It was years and years of really putting in the work I needed to, and the sacrifices to make it happen. So, but to answer your question, so yeah, pretty much every weekend I was waking up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays, going to Central Park, doing a morning race, coming back, usually taking a nap while my friends were out at a boozy brunch. Like I was so tired by the time, noon came on Saturdays. And then I kind of started winning some novice races in Central Park, and then did some regional races and did well at those. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, well, you can only train so much in Central Park. And if I want to become a better cyclist, I really have to move somewhere that's conducive to training. And so I started looking at jobs in California. I also wanted to work for a female venture capitalist, and I met this woman, Emily Melton, who was a partner in California, and I really wanted to work for her. So things just kind of aligned, and I moved to California in 2018. And again, every single weekend I was spent driving sometimes 4 8 hours away to a race, spending Saturday racing, Sunday racing, driving home on Sunday night, working Monday through Friday. And so it was kind of like this progression where I just started doing more competitive races, bigger races. I started doing 100-mile rides on the weekends, and all my free time was consumed with cycling. So I was either working in my job or I was cycling. There wasn't, I wasn't going to Tahoe and camping with my friends. Like I wasn't going to Yosemite and doing all these things that a lot of people do when they move to San Francisco in their 20s. And eventually I got to the point where I knew I could be competitive, and it was just a matter of what was I willing to sacrifice to make it in cycling. And I think that's where the questions really started to arise, and the internal struggle about whether I needed to leave my job or not.
Wow. What were the indicators that you were competitive enough to be professional? And then what was your decision process in ultimately taking the leap? I mean, venture capital is a career many aspire to ultimately leaving that career and pursue professional athletics.
Yeah, well, so I'd won quite a few races in Central Park, and so I knew that from like a local standpoint, I was competitive. And then when I moved to California, I started doing regional races. I started doing more competitive races, and I also won a lot of races in California. I won races with people who had been way more experienced than me. And I think what really struck me was my trajectory. Like I wasn't the best one at every race, but my trajectory was really fast. And so I thought, okay, well, if I can continue this, then in a year or two, I can be quite competitive. And so I was able to join a domestic pro team in 2020. And my plan was to keep my full-time job and then take some vacation days to do these kind of bigger stage races in America. And then basically go to races every weekend, because most races were on Saturdays, Sundays. So I thought, okay, I'd work Monday through Friday, fly Friday night to a race on Saturday, fly back and do my job Monday through Friday. And I thought that would be a pretty exhausting schedule, but I figured I'd try it for a year and just see what happened. So that was 2020, and then COVID hit. So we actually never had racing in America. And so there's this work from home environment. I was training, trying to stay fit during that time. And because there was no racing in America, the team I had been racing for said, okay, well, the only way that we can race is by sending you to Europe. And I said, well, I can't really go to Europe. I have this full-time job that I have to attend. And in kind of a fortunate way, everyone was working from home during COVID. And so I said, okay, well, maybe I can work remotely in my job and be in Europe for a month, but like realistically, that might not happen. So I was able to convince my boss to let me do a month of remote part-time work in Europe so that I could try this European race block. I actually think it was more like a month and a half of remote and half time. So that race block in Europe, I flew to Europe in September. My first race was, I think, September 1st. So I flew in August. And I would say that was the hardest month and a half of my entire life. Like I was waking up at 6 a.m., doing Excel spreadsheets. I would leave at 8 a.m. for the stage race. We'd drive 2 hours there. I would race all day long. In the bus on the way there, I was doing Excel models with really bad Wi-Fi, using my phone, trying to get cell phone service in this camper going up a mountain, like trying to do Excel spreadsheets. And, we didn't have a bus, we had a camper. So there's like 6 athletes all squished into this camper. I'm sitting in the back, which is like this bed setup, like lying down, trying to get cell phone data to do this Excel modeling. And then I'd read through board decks and try to take notes. Meanwhile, my teammates are getting ready for the race, and then after the race, as soon as I got back into the camper, I'd be back on my computer, and in the back of the camper, reading through board decks, making notes for my boss, getting back. I remember I got back to our hotel after the race, and I had a board meeting that I was almost going to run late for. And I think I had 5 minutes between the time I got back and when the board meeting started. And I just finished this race, and I had a baguette and a protein shake for dinner, and I was eating it like well on the board call. I didn't even have time to shower, so I like put my hair up and tried to look half decent and put on a nice shirt. And like I really felt like I was like failing at everything during that time. Like it was not at all easy. and I mean, stage racing is hard enough, let alone your first ever stage race in Europe, and then trying to do that while, doing work for your boss in the back of a camper in these 4-hour commutes, to and from the races. And so that was for sure the hardest. And I knew if I could get through that, then I would at least have some answers about whether it was possible for me. So during that stage race, it was really hard. And I think, the media has this like glorified story of like, oh, she quit her job and won a gold medal. And it's like, you have no idea like how hard it was and how much sacrifice and how crazy it seems in retrospect that I did this.
It seems absolutely crazy, absolutely insane, because venture capital is a very demanding job just doing venture capital. And I get stressed out about the idea of working on, I don't know, hotel Wi-Fi in a European capital. Oh my God, it's not good enough for me to do my demanding office job. I can't imagine being in a camper, having raced a professional event, looking at a board deck or writing an investment memo. Kristen,
yeah,
wow.
and we'd come back to the hotel, and I'd have to skip every single dinner with my team. They would sit down, they'd have a post-race meal. I was like, I'm sorry, I have a board meeting in 5 minutes. Like I can't eat with you guys, and so I would grab a baguette and like this plate of food, and I had to grab something that I could like kind of eat during the meeting, but like not really be obvious that I'm eating dinner. So like I'd be on a Zoom call, and I'd be like biting on a baguette, drinking my protein shake, being like, excuse me, I haven't eaten dinner yet, just trying to scrape by. And for the most part, it was fine, but I don't think people really knew how much I was struggling during that time to try and make it all work.
It's hard to fathom. How did you finally take the leap to going full time?
Yeah, so there were a few things I really needed to know before I made this decision. The first was I wanted to know that I could actually be competitive and I could be good at this. And so in that stage race I just described, I won a stage at that race. And so I said, okay, well, I know I can be competitive in Europe if I commit to it. So that was the first thing, is I just wanted to know that I could be competitive. The second was I wanted to know that I would enjoy it, and because I think we glorify this life as a professional athlete, but it can be a lot more challenging. Like you're away from home, you sleep in hotel rooms, you're always on the road. You're away from your friends and family. It's not as glorified as people think. And especially when I started, like women's salaries, women's TV coverage, like none of that is where it is now. And so it was not a glorious job in any way. So I think this race walk that I did to Europe in the fall of 2020 really helped me understand like what it actually looks like to be a professional cyclist over there. And do I actually enjoy it? And I got back from that trip and I said, okay, I enjoy it. I think I would really like it. Worst case, I try it for a year, I don't like it, and I can maybe get a job again in Silicon Valley. So first thing was, yeah, I wanted to know I could be good at it. I wanted to know I liked it. And the third thing was I wanted to know that I had at least a year of savings. And so that way, I wasn't making any money. I think my first year I made $7,000 as a stipend. Like there was no money in women's cycling when I started. And so I needed to have a year of savings to support myself. And I said, okay, I'll give it a year. If I don't make it after a year, then I'll come back and get another job. So it took me years of working in venture capital to have the savings I needed. And then the last thing was it actually was important to me that I had a resume in venture capital that I could point to and come back to if it didn't work out. And so in my mind, I said, okay, I want to know that I've worked on some deals that have done well. And that if I ever want to come back after a year, say cycling doesn't work out, I can point to those and say, hey, look, I actually did something useful and I did a good job, and I wanted to make sure that my bosses would give me good recommendations and I had work that I could point to. Because even though I was really struggling trying to make both work, the reality was I really cared about my work. I really wanted to do a good job. And I owed it to my bosses to make sure that I was still giving 100% in my job, even when I was cycling. So those were the four things that I really laid out for myself. And once I kind of knew, okay, I can be competitive, I like it, I have enough savings, and I have a credible resume, that was where the point kind of came, like, okay, now I can do this. And it's like really scary, but at the same time, I had reached this point where it wasn't like, oh, I could see myself being a cyclist. It was like, I can't not do it. Like, I think sometimes you talk to entrepreneurs and they have that feeling like I can't not do this. And I had reached that breaking point where every day I was just like, this is what I want to be doing. And when I would train, I was happiest on the bike and I would visualize myself as a professional. And I was like, I think if I continue in my job, I will maybe be giving less than 100% over the next year because I'll be wishing I was somewhere else. And that's where I realized, okay, I have to try this. And if it doesn't work out, I can always come back, but I have to try it because when I'm older, I'm going to regret it if I didn't try it, And I had this dream to go to the Olympics. I had it since I was a kid. And I just realized, like, if I didn't try it, like, there's no way I was going to go to the Olympics. Like, the only way that I was going to maybe have a chance at going is if I quit my job. And, like, that was it. There was no other option. So I don't think, it was a hard decision, but it also, in my heart, was really easy. Because in my heart, I knew I had a dream to go to the Olympics. Like, it wasn't this thing I thought about and said, oh, that'd be cool. It was like a real dream I'd had since I was a kid. And there was only one way to make it happen. And I had to leave my job. So, yeah, it got to the point where I knew what I had to do. I just needed to have the courage to do it.
And you did it, ultimately. It became an inspiration for us office athletes all over the world. And I think back to like starting my own career in finance after college. I was an office athlete, but I peaked out at maybe being named Citigroup Gym Member of the Month one time and getting my picture on the wall in our investment banking gym. You went all the way pro, and ultimately you fulfilled this dream of reaching the Olympics. Let's talk and fast forward a little bit to the Paris 2024 Olympics. So it was a big journey getting there professionally. I've read about your story, and like I know there were other elements like a late selection to the team, overcoming an injury. We can talk about any one of those, but it was a big journey. But you finally got there, and you're in the women's road cycling race. Paint the picture for us. You're a relative newcomer to the sport. You're in the event competing against the best in the world, European powerhouses, athletes you've seen win all the major events the last several years. What was your mindset going into that road cycling race in Paris?
Oh, I knew I wanted to win a medal. Like I wasn't going to participate. I had team pursuit, which was another event 2 days later, and we had a really good chance at getting a medal in that event. And I didn't want to be tired for team pursuit. And so the only reason I would do the road race is if I thought I had a chance at a medal. Because at the end of the day, USA Cycling, our goal is to bring home as many medals as possible. So if me doing the road race was going to potentially compromise team pursuit, then the only reason for me to do the road race is if I also thought I could get a medal in the road race. Otherwise, why do it? And I think this is like another story I think has been glorified by the media. Like, yes, I started late in cycling, but I'd won a lot of races in Europe. I knew that I had a good chance at a medal. Like, I wasn't completely out of left field going into the race. I was the current national champion for the USA. I'd won 3 Grand Tour stages. 6 at Strade Bianche. I'd already won a classics race that year. I'd had several World Tour podiums in Europe. And so, like, I wasn't a nobody. Like, I had actually beat these women in many races before. And so I knew that the course profile really suited me because it was a lot of these sub 5-minute climbs, which I had been training all year on the track. I knew that the smaller field size would suit me. I knew that the lack of race radios would suit me because actually I'm quite strategic in races, even though I started quite late. I think just having like a very analytical approach to it. And I knew that my fitness was really high and that this was going to be a race of attrition. I also knew that it was probably going to come down to a small selection of riders in the end. And the only way for me to win that way is through attacking. And that is exactly what I did. And I knew going into the race exactly where I wanted to attack. I said, there's going to be a small selection that comes into that final straight. And if I attack and I get a gap, no one's gonna catch me. Like I knew that that I'm probably the best attacking rider in the entire peloton. Like if you take me 3K from the finale and I get a gap, like no one will catch me. And I knew that was my strong suit in racing, and it always has been. And so the dynamics of the race and the dynamics of the course, I went in knowing that it actually suited me quite well. And I also knew that because America only had 2 riders, we had to play it really smart and we had to be really patient. And I knew that the other teams were going to have to do a lot more work than us because they had more riders, and that I could kind of go under the radar a little bit. So I went in with a strategy, which was basically drop as many people as I can on the circuit, get a really small selection to get to the finish, and then attack the selection. That was my race strategy, and that's exactly what happened. So I think, I went into it with a plan, and the plan worked perfectly. But I think, there were a lot of things that did work out in my favor, and I definitely wasn't a guaranteed win for the race. But I also want to kind of break this myth that like I was completely out of left field and no one had any expectations that I would do well. And, I was a last minute call up, because actually I was a last minute call up to the race, but that's only because the USA didn't select anyone for the road race. They selected people for the time trial. And had they selected people for the road race, I would have probably made the team as like the best American road racer right now. And so, I think, it definitely was a surprise to a lot of people, but it's also not like I was this new girl who never ridden against these women before and like kind of randomly got the win.
I got you. And I love that mindset you had coming in of like, I didn't come to participate, I came to medal. And I also love just how much you had a clear plan and strategy when it came time to execute on that last stretch. I mean, it looked pretty dramatic watching on TV. I remember the announcer being like, there goes Faulkner. She launches her move up the left-hand side, and you just left the other cyclist in the dust. How did that unfold from your perspective when it came time to make your move?
Yeah, well, I was chasing back with Kopecky, and I knew Kopecky was not feeling super strong because when she was on the front, we weren't closing the gap. And at first I thought she was just kind of playing poker with me, like trying to get me to do all the work. But I knew she wanted to win the race. Like she would not have been content with 3rd place. And I knew she was motivated to close the gap. And I could tell by the way she was breathing hard, the way she didn't attack on the climb before, like I could tell from her body language that she was pretty tired. And I thought, okay, well, if I attack her and get a gap, I can win. And then I said, okay, well, we have 2 riders up front we need to catch. So once we catch them, then what do I do? And I said, okay, well, those 2 riders have been out in the front for about an hour. They're probably going to be tired from being solo out front for a while. I'm a better time trialist than both of them. And none of them are going to be incentivized to work together because whoever chases me is going to be the one that misses out on the medal because there's 4 riders and 3 medals. So whoever chases me, they're kind of essentially screwing themselves, excuse my language. So I knew that the dynamics actually really worked in my favor. And I also knew that this was the exact spot that I had planned to attack in from months before. There's actually a story. So a month before the road race, USA Cycling tried to convince me to not do it because they were worried that it would affect team pursuit and that I wouldn't have a chance at a medal. So they actually sat me down in a room and they said, Kristen, we don't want you to do the road race. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, we think you have less than a 6% chance at a medal. And I said, no, I think I have a much higher percent chance than that. And they said, well, how are you going to win? And I said, I'm going to attack from a small selection on the final straightaway. That was it. And I said that. I called it a month and a half before the race, and that's exactly what happened. So I definitely had this plan going into the race. So that's exactly how I wanted to win. So when the opportunity came, it wasn't necessarily a split-second decision. Like I did have to think on my feet and figure out like how do I get Kopecky there without her knowing that I'm strong, because I didn't want Kopecky to know how strong I was, or else she wouldn't do work with me. So I had to have a plan to set myself up for that attack. But once I was in the position for the attack, I knew exactly what I needed to do.
Thank you for tuning into the Dino podcast. If you're enjoying this episode and generally like the conversations we have on the show, please consider supporting our Patreon today. Your membership on Patreon is a tip and a thank you to the creators that work hard on the show. It also comes with exclusive member benefits, such as access to bonus episodes and exclusive content available only on Patreon. Consider becoming a member today. It costs less than one cup of coffee, one fancy cup of coffee in New York per month, and signing up is easy. You can find the Patreon link right in our Spotify show page, or simply search the Dino podcast on patreon.com. I appreciate you listening and really love the community behind the podcast. Consider supporting the show and become a Dino head on Patreon today. It's incredible just how well you executed the plan, but also just how well thought out the plan was, like to the point of being dynamic, and it's a 4-person pack, and this is like this dynamic almost sort of like game theory that you're doing in your head. That's absolutely incredible. Kristen,
yeah, I mean, I think I'm sorry.
After you, sorry.
I was gonna say, a lot of people watch cycling races and they don't fully understand all the tactics that go into it. And every single race, this is what we're doing. It's like 50% physical and 50% tactical. And so, that race awareness and that race strategy, it comes from years and years of racing in Europe this way, and I think when you, especially for me, like this is how I win. Like I win races by doing last minute attacks or early attacks. And so when I've practiced that way of winning several times, the first thing I do when I look at a new course is I say, okay, how do I win? Where do I attack? How do I win from a small group? What is the finish going to look like? And so as soon as I saw the Olympic course, that was the first thing I thought about. I said, okay, I need to win from a small group. How do I make a small group and how do I win from it? And I think, in the same way that all of us in our job kind of have this intuition from repetition. I think I had the same thing from racing for so many years. And so, yeah, the first thing I thought when I looked at the course was, where do I attack?
Incredible. And you executed perfectly. Kristen, how did it feel when you finally crossed the finish line? How did it feel in the moment? And now looking back with some time, how do you reflect on your gold medal and win?
I'll be honest. Going into the Olympic road race, I wasn't that nervous. I had to treat it like any other race because I knew that if I treated it like this really big deal, that maybe I would get nervous, I would get overwhelmed, and I wouldn't be so relaxed at the race. So leading up to the race, I really convinced myself, like, this is just another race. It's not a big deal. It's just another race. And so when I attacked and I won, I was like, oh, this is great. I won, but it took me a while for it to really sink in and to realize like, oh, this wasn't just another race. Like this was the biggest race of my life. And this was the biggest win of my life. And so when I crossed the finish line, actually there's this funny video of me just like riding past the finish line and people wonder if I knew I'd won. And I'll dispel the myths. Like, yes, I knew I'd won. I just had a race 2 days later. So I had to spin my legs. That was the first thing on my mind, to be honest, was I need to spin my legs. I have a race in 2 days. This job is done. I have another job to get to. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a big celebratory photo, but I had a race 2 days later, and like the Olympics weren't over for me, I still
Sure.
had a job to do. So when I crossed the finish line, I was like, "Yeah, I won! Like, it's awesome. Okay, next race." I don't think I had time to really process how significant it was for me. I don't think even the next day, I was so focused on team pursuit, and I think that was the downside to having two races so close together is that like emotionally I couldn't celebrate too much after the road race because I couldn't let my emotions get so high and so variable right before this huge race I had the next day. So it wasn't until after team pursuit where I really let it all sink in.
Okay, okay. And how do you feel now looking back on both gold medals?
I feel a lot of emotions. I feel a big sense of relief, like just all of the hard work that went into it, and it's like wow, I feel pride, like I made it happen. Um, I feel like the biggest life dream I ever had for myself was to go to the Olympics and to win a gold medal. Like that was it, and I did it. And so there's this feeling of like a huge accomplishment. Like I did something that people thought I wouldn't do. I did something that um like the 10-year-old girl inside of me has wanted to make happen for 20 years. I think that's a really good feeling. But to be honest, of all of the like, there's been a lot of media, there's been a lot of, praise, there's been a lot of people who are really happy for me. But like the thing that makes me the most happy is it's not that, it's knowing that there's like a 10-year-old girl inside of me who had a really big dream and she had a lot of things in the way and she made it happen. And for me to look back at myself and my 10-year-old version of myself and just know like that if I want something and I'm willing to work hard for it, I can make it happen. I think that's the best feeling in the world. It's like a really fulfilling feeling, and that makes everyone else's, praise completely irrelevant. And that's when you really know like you did it for yourself and it was a big goal. So yeah, I think to be honest, I'm still processing some of the emotions from the Olympics, but they're all good. They're all great. It's just I think for me it was such an internal thing. It was something I did for myself, and so the greatest source of pride I have is when I think about that 10-year-old girl, inside me.
What strikes me most listening to your story, Kristen, is just how much internal intrinsic motivation you have and call upon. I mean, it takes so much to reach the mountaintop of a sport. It takes so much to do venture capital while competing in professional road cycling races. And it seems like you've always had that like desire to pursue what you wanted to pursue and to self-actualize, to be the very best in whatever it is you had in your sights. So, have you, even as a young person in Alaska, did you pursue like rowing the same way, like other athletic pursuits, academic pursuits, as a force of nature, like you are now, clearly?
I think it's a theme from my life. I think so. I would say so. I had this basketball coach when I was in middle school, and I was not a basketball player. Like I was not coordinated at all. But I remember she said something to me that really struck me. Like I was at this very formative age. I think I was 12 or 13, and she said, "Whatever you do in life, like do it with passion. Like whatever you do, make sure you're passionate about it." And it really struck me, and I think like maybe because I'd already been kind of living that way a little bit, but it reinforced in me that yeah, like I wanted to bring a sense of like passion and vivacity to everything I did in life. And if I didn't feel passion for something, then it was a sign I maybe shouldn't be doing it. And that's just, I mean, that's not to say like there's hard things you have to do that you're not going to be passionate about, like taxes. But like in my life, I feel like every job I've had, everything I've pursued, it's been something I really have a strong passion for. Like I didn't go into VC because it was like a prestigious job and it paid well and it had good career. Like I went in because I really wanted, like I really enjoyed working with entrepreneurs. Like it made me so excited. They're so passionate. They're so smart. They're so curious. And I wanted to be around that energy all day, every day. And when I started cycling, I love cycling. And so I think this desire to be my best at something, it's a lot easier to do that when you really love what you're doing. And like when I graduated college, like there were many high paying jobs that I didn't take that would have paid more, but I was like, I don't feel the same passion for them. I don't feel the same energy. I don't feel the same like intrinsic motivation. And I knew that for me, the number one like ingredient to my success in life was going to be how much intrinsic energy I felt towards what I was doing. And so taking, you know, yes, like VC is a very sought after job, but like, you know, it wasn't the highest paying job I got. It wasn't, and yet like it was where I was going to feel like I was the most motivated. And I knew that if I had a job where I was the most motivated, I was going to find a way to be successful. And the same was true with cycling. Like I knew that if I was passionate about it and I was willing to work hard, that energy would help me be successful. And if there was a job that I didn't feel passionate about, like I wouldn't be able to bring that to work every day. I wouldn't be able to bring that energy, and I wouldn't be as successful as I could. And so anyway, to answer your question, I think, yes, I've always been like very type A. I've always wanted to be my best. I've always wanted to see what I can achieve. But I think that the main ingredient in that is being super self-aware and about what drives me, and being willing to put myself in situations where I'm only doing things that I really feel that energy for.
Listeners, there are a lot of lessons to unpack there for even for our office jobs. Pursue what you're passionate about. How much sacrifice it takes to really be a high performer. And yeah, Kristen, that's a very inspirational story about your journey, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. If it's okay, I'd like to shift gears a little bit now and talk about fitness and nutrition. Give our office athletes listeners some advice on how an elite athlete like yourself pursues these things. And we're going to do that through a rapid fire segment. So
Great.
Yes, the way it'll work is I'll name several food groups or meals, and I'll ask you to respond with either clap it up if you're into it, or get it out of here if you're not into it. This is our nutrition focused bodega corner, a recurring segment on the show. Okay, so if we're ready, steak and red meat. Clap it up or get it. We're going to clap it up for steak and red meat. Why?
Clap it up. Why?
Yeah.
Oh, it tastes good. It's high in protein. And it has iron. I think a lot of, especially female athletes, can be low in iron sometimes. And I think having red meat helps keep your iron levels up. So yeah, for those 3 reasons.
All right. Get that iron.
And also sometimes after like, I haven't had meat for a really long time. Like I just crave a burger. Like I'm a big believer in like trust, like listening to your body. And like, yeah, you don't want to listen to your body if you want potato chips and soda every day. But like when you have these cravings, I think you need to listen to them. And sometimes I just really crave like a burger or a piece of meat.
All right. That's encouraging to hear. What about pasta? Clap it up or get it out here.
I do eat lots of pasta, but I would say the thing about like a lot of carbs like that is I think it's important to eat them at the right time. So I actually don't think there's like foods you like can't eat or shouldn't eat. I just think it's about when you eat them. So for a high carb pasta, for example, like have that after a big ride. Have it on a day you've exercised a lot. Like don't have it on your rest day. But yes, I love pasta.
So do I. Dark chocolate.
100%. That's like my daily dessert.
Clap it up for dark chocolate. That's my daily dessert too. Protein powder.
Yep, I have a protein shake after every ride.
Clap it up for protein shakes. A glass of wine.
Occasionally. I have nothing against drinking. I think as a professional athlete, like, yeah, a glass of wine is fine every maybe one a week or one every few weeks. Personally, I actually have never really been a big drinker. Even in college, I didn't really drink. That's not for, like, I have no judgment. It's just I don't really love the taste of alcohol, and I don't like being dehydrated, and I don't like how it makes me feel the next day. That's the only reason why. But if I'm celebrating at dinner, a glass of wine, absolutely.
And then the last food group to either clap it up for or get it out of here, gelato.
I love gelato.
Yeah.
I love gelato. I would say I've been a bit more disciplined the last 2 years. When I first moved to Girona, I think the day that I moved to Girona, the first thing I did was went and got 3 scoops of gelato. And then I had it like every day that week. So I've become a bit more tame in my in my day. But I do enjoy a good scoop of gelato.
Amazing. I envision it as part of like a European cyclist routine, you know.
The thing about gelato or like sugary desserts or any of that, I think have it after a ride when your body needs the sugar, or have it after a high fiber, high protein, meal where your sugars are going to absorb more slowly. And I think that's the thing about desserts or sugar or any of that pasta is like just make sure you're timing it right, and then it's fine. Don't eat it every single day, but it's fine.
Make sure you're timing it right. Okay. So this concludes the rapid fire food group Bodega Corner. Um, a more open-ended question, like how do you, broadly speaking, approach nutrition as an elite athlete?
Mm. So I think the most important thing is having healthy habits. And when I say that, I mean like you shouldn't have to think too hard about what you're going to eat every day. Like if you have a routine, that's a lot easier. So my routine when I come home from a ride, I have a salad and I have some rice and I have some veggies, and like I usually have maybe one of 10 meals that I usually pick from. And I like to experiment, for dinner a bit more, but um, maybe even like five after my ride. Like it's pretty routine, and I know I'm gonna get my carbs, I'm gonna get my veggies, I'm gonna get my protein, and that's just what I do. I get my protein shake as soon as I come home from a ride every day. That's routine. Every single ride, every single day, no matter what. I have my protein shake afterwards with banana or some fruit. And so, yeah, number one is like have habits that are healthy that you just kind of don't even think about. It's like very autonomous that you're doing with your life. If for some desk job workers, that might mean you have the same salad place that you go to for lunch every day. But I think that's, yeah, healthy habits. The second thing is, as I mentioned this before, um, I think timing your food is something that's really underrated. People often talk about what we
Mm.
eat, and I think what we eat is really important. We know you are what you eat. Um, but the timing of it is not something we talk about in like mainstream media or literature, but it's super important. Like when you have carbohydrates, like actually having them right after a ride is a good thing, but having them at 9 p.m. before you go to bed is not a good thing. So the timing of food has a huge impact on your health, but it also has a huge impact on your performance and your recovery. And so timing, I would say, is the second thing to look into. And then the third thing is, I would say, be healthy, but I don't think you need to be super extreme. Like, I say like there's no foods that are really off limits. There's foods that I like minimize or that I try to avoid. There's foods like I don't eat a lot of fried food because for me it's just not really worth it. Like I don't love it. I mean, I like it, but I don't love it, and it's not really worth it for me. But there's other foods that are absolutely worth it for me, like a scoop of gelato. If I want to have a treat, like that's worth it for me. And so I think kind of knowing which foods are like worth it for you and which ones aren't, and like not being hyper extreme about everything, but just having kind of like I think a balanced approach. Like, oh, you know, I'll limit this or minimize this as opposed to like completely restricting. Um, at least that works for me. I don't like to be completely restrictive. Some people it works, but for me it doesn't. Um, I would say those are like my three golden rules. Yeah, like healthy habits, timing is king for most things, and then don't be overly restrictive. Just be um, just be like thoughtful.
A lot of that really resonates with me as well. And listeners, I hope you're taking notes. If you follow these golden rules, I can't promise you'll make the Olympics, but maybe member of the month at your local investment banking gym is something you can strive for. So, Kristen, that's the nutrition side. What's your training regimen, day to day between races?
It changes a lot depending on the time of season, if I'm at altitude, if I've been traveling a lot. I would say I can go over kind of like the year, what the year looks like, and then what the day looks like. From a year standpoint, I always make sure I take 3 to 4 weeks off a year, completely off the bike. Don't touch the bike. That's usually in October after my last race. I don't touch the bike. Sometimes I might go on a run, but I don't have to. Sometimes I'll go to the gym, but I don't have to. It's just a month where I don't feel pressure to do training. And then after that, it's just a lot of long, easy rides, just very build up the base, zone 2, zone 1, like long rides, 3 to 4 to 5 hours every single day, but no intensity really. And then starting in like January, I'll do kind of longer 20-minute efforts. And then as we get to closer to like March, that's February, March, then we start doing shorter efforts, 5 minute, 10 minute. And then once the classic season starts, say like end of February, early March, we get a lot of our intensity from racing. And so between races, we're actually not doing that much intensity because we race twice a week and they're super intense. So a lot of between races is just focused on kind of easy riding and recovery. And then as we get to kind of the longer stage races in the summertime, and you might have like a 3-week block of training, that's when you start to incorporate, bigger, like more intensity into your training. So you maybe do like 30-30s or 5-minute efforts, and you do intensity, say 2, maybe 3 times a week. And then the other days are usually endurance rides. I usually say 1 day a week is a recovery day, so an hour and a half easy. 1 day is a complete rest day. And then the other 5 days are training. Usually that's 2 intensity days, 2 really long endurance days, and 1 medium, say 3-hour day. And that's like generally what my week looks like. On an average day, I would say I average a 3-hour ride. I do core workouts 2 to 3 times a week. A lot of athletes go to the gym. I haven't been, but I might start doing that for next year, TBD. I do yoga once or twice a week, and I get 8 hours of sleep a night. That's also training. People don't think that sleep is training, but sleep is very much part of your training. And if you're skipping your sleep, you might as well skip the gym.
Undervalued the sleep part of the routine. That's where the body recovers.
Yeah.
Kristen, I appreciate this fitness and nutrition advice. And I think we're rounding the last turn. And I want to be cognizant of your time as well. So I'll just 1 or 2 last questions. On the professional side, do you see yourself one day coming back to venture capital or private equity investing or something? Let's start a fund together is what I'm poking at.
It's so funny. I get this question all the time. Like every single person who interviews me asks me this. The short answer is in some capacity. Like I love working with entrepreneurs. Maybe I can be an angel investor. Maybe I want to go back into VC, but I don't want to completely leave the industry. Like I really enjoyed the work I did before. The longer answer is like, 5 years ago, I had no idea that I'd be doing what I do now. So for me to predict where I'll be in 5 years, like who knows? I have no idea. Do I want to go back into SaaS investing? Do I want to do something that's more like health and wellness? Like I have no idea where my interests will be in a few years. I'm just started a master's of nutrition because I'm interested in nutrition. So I think, being able to predict where I'm going to be 5 to 7 years from now is kind of impossible for me. But to answer your question, I really enjoyed VC. I really enjoyed investing, and I would love to be involved in that world in some capacity. If I don't go back into VC, then I want to be an angel investor. I'd want to, advise companies. I'd want to do something in the field. But I think there's a high probability that I'll go back into the industry for sure.
Okay. Well, look, I think you have the perspective and mindset to be successful in VC or some pursuits in health or anything you ultimately decide to take on. Kristen, I think we can leave it here. I just want to say one more time, I was really inspired by what you did in Paris. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's a real honor for the show. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great conversation, and I really appreciate your questions and your thoughtfulness, and it's been great chatting.
Perfect. Okay, we'll be in touch. Have a great day.
Thank you.